So we will proceed with our second panel. And with me for this purpose is Justine Nzweundji. And she's representing the Institute of Medical Research and Medicinal Plant Studies in Cameroon. Justine is also one of our female science talents champions of this cohort. So please give a warm applause to her.
Thank you, Julia. Thank you, everyone. I am happy to be here today and honored to be the moderator of this session. So we have with us 4 panelists, 4 great leaders, female, who work on science diplomacy area or experience international cooperation in their work. So I will invite here Effrosyni Chelioti. She's the Deputy Managing Director of Helmholtz Association in Berlin, and one of her responsibilities is to advise government entities on science, diplomacy, and internationalization of science and innovation. You are welcome. Second is Geraldine Rauch. She has been the president of the Technical University in Berlin since April 2022, and in 2015, she accepted the position of university professor where she worked as deputy director of the Institute of Medical Biometry and Epidemiology. You are welcome, Geraldine. Then Kathryn Boyd has been the UK's country director for trade and investment in Germany and deputy trade commissioner of Europe since May 2022. Most recently, she was deputy director for competitiveness and dispute resolution in the EU Secretary in the UK Cabinet Office. You're welcome, Kathryn. And our last panelist, not the least, Rana Dajani. She's a professor of molecular biology, molecular cell biology at the Hashemite University in Jordan, and the president of SATA, and former director and chair of OWSD. She's the president of the Society for the Advancement of Science, Technology, and Innovation in the Arab world. You're welcome, Rana. So the topic is about the relevance of international collaboration, cooperation, and the female leadership in science and diplomacy. So science and diplomacy actually is very crucial to address the challenges the world is facing today. It's also important to foster international cooperation. It's important to exchange knowledge, to exchange resources, and most important also, I can mention according to our topic, is to facilitate the development of diplomatic ties amongst the country. But there is a problem, the gender gap in the field of science diplomacy. That's why we need discussion today. We need to have concrete action to address that. So our distinguished panelists today will tell us more about their perspective, the perspective of inclusion and diversity to enrich this field of science diplomacy. They will share with us their challenges, maybe the opportunity in that field, and see how we can support female leaders, or maybe the next generation of female leaders in female leadership in science and diplomacy. So what matters most in this topic, for this panel, is to go beyond the public discourse and try to implement some policy with the feminist perspective. So I hope that our discussion will inspire us and then help us know where we stand and how we can move forward. So I'll start with the first question to our panelists. How does inclusion of diverse perspectives, especially women, in the science diplomacy can enhance and the effectiveness and the relevance of the effective scientific initiative at the global level? So maybe Effrosyni, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you very much. First of all, let me say how much I'm delighted to be here, and I've been really enjoying the conversations since this morning. Well, yes, we all hope that our science diplomacy efforts are enhanced by a stronger female presence on the one hand, but a more diverse body of diplomats on the other. And this starts very early on in the selection of people who become science diplomats. As you may know, many of us who engage in these efforts are not diplomats in the sense of public servants that have gone through respective training, but represent rather institutions that act as diplomatic, let's say, entities and engage in activities worldwide. So I think this is important to mention at the beginning of this conversation that there are a lot of institutions that have engaged in science diplomacy and see themselves as ambassadors of their own country, of their own thematic field, and of their own group, ethnic or other type of group. And the more diverse this body of individuals is, the more diverse science diplomacy gets to be. And this is why we at the Helmholtz Association, for those who are not aware of what our organization does, we are a research performing organization, the largest in Germany and in Europe, have been encouraging both administrators and scientists early on to acknowledge the importance of their roles as ambassadors beyond their national borders, to engage with partners in other countries, in every country possible, not necessarily the ones very close to home or the ones that we would immediately say we share the values, but all kinds of countries, and expand their horizons and realize how important it is to immerse themselves in these exchanges and slowly build their skills to become science diplomats at some point.
Okay, thank you so much. So, and Kathryn?
So let me start by saying I'm a Deputy Trade Commissioner for the UK, which means that I'm not strictly a scientist, but we work in our trade network, we work a lot with tech companies, with innovators, and with scientists who've moved into the business community. You've asked, what does diversity bring to science diplomacy, and particularly with women in mind, and that's a great question. I mean, the obvious answer, of course, as we've just touched upon, is that you want all the talent. So you've got to be broad. You've got to open up to 50% of the world's population if you want to get the best possible communicators into the scientific diplomacy community. But there are three specific reasons that I would pick out why I think it's so important to have women who are science diplomats. Firstly, as a diplomat, full stop, but as a science diplomat, you're trying to persuade other countries and other organizations to change their way of doing things. And you're coming from, I'm coming from the UK. We have a problem with female representation in all sorts of areas there, and yet we're going and talking to other countries, to other governments, and saying, we want you to expand participation to women. And you're not going to get very far with that if the people making the arguments are all men. So you have to, we have to make sure that we've got really strong, capable women who are going out there and persuading people, look what you can have too if you open up your doors to women. The second thing is that with a lot of the biggest scientific challenges we're facing, women will be disproportionately impacted. Climate change is the obvious example, but there are some kind of health challenges as well. And it shouldn't matter whether you're a man or a woman, how much you think about and care about those specific impacts. But I think it's true that you do see it in a particular way if you come from that that group, which in many places is a marginalized group, and therefore it's at the forefront of your mind. Okay, we need to solve these problems, because if we don't, and if we don't bring that perspective to the table, then these challenges, climate change or pandemics, are going to hold back a lot of our broader objectives. And then the third thing is, and again, I know it's a little bit risky to say this, but women often do, for whatever reason, bring a different style and a different sort of culture to the diplomatic table. And diplomacy is so much about negotiation. And negotiation is only successful when you put yourself in somebody else's shoes and you really think and feel, what do they want out of this? And how can I give them something that they want so that they're going to give me something I want? And in one of my previous jobs, I worked actually for many years on the Brexit negotiations, which was challenging and fraught, and yes, there were women involved. But when we were going through this like final, very difficult negotiation, and we had Michel Barnier was the leader of the European negotiating team, and then we had David Frost, I was working for and leading the British team. And I honestly, from having experienced that personally, I honestly think that if we hadn't had a few key women in a few key positions, and I'm not going to say, it was on both sides, I'm not going to say exactly what happened, but I'm not sure we would have reached an agreement, and I think the UK might have come out of the EU without a deal. And that's because of compromise, and people being willing to compromise.
Okay. Thank you so much, Kathryn. So maybe I was the same question, but asked differently. What are the risks not to incorporating women in the domain of science diplomacy? Rana?
Okay, so I'm going to share some stories. I've been famously known as a storyteller, by the way, and I think we learn by stories. And I like to think that as humans evolved across millennia, there was two groups of people. There was a group of people who sat around a fire and told stories, and there was another group who frowned and said they're wasting their time. But you can imagine which group actually survived. It was the storytellers. So in the spirit of evolution and storytelling, I'm going to share some concrete examples that would highlight, through storytelling, the risks, the challenges, the opportunities that present themselves, and as a path for individual scientists, wherever you are in the world, whatever position you are. You don't have to be part of the government. There's roles each and one of you can play from where they are today. So I'm a mom. I have 4 kids. So I always like to start with that proudly, because unfortunately neither men or women start with that, and we don't realize how important that is. So that is a statement for policy, right? That's important. But I'm a hardcore scientist. I do epigenetics of trauma. But sometimes, and I never thought of myself as somebody involved with policy or science diplomacy. But life pushes you in directions you did not anticipate. And that's part of being a scientist. You see what everybody sees, but you think what no one has thought. So I was we discovered a new gene, and we wanted to express it in stem cells, in human embryonic stem cells. And I thought, wait a minute, I'm obviously a Muslim. Is this okay in my ethical guideline? Well, apparently in the International Society for Stem Cell Research and Therapy, their committee does not say anything about Muslims, although there's 1.7 billion in the world. And many of them live in the West, so this will be part of their life, whether they're a patient, a physician, or a scientist. And so I took it upon myself to create a committee of different stakeholders to come to some consensus that can help guide me, at least, in my work in Jordan, and then become a beacon for others. And that led to so many things of me, working in policy, not because I wanted to, but because I had to. I had to step in. Another one, which was mentioned earlier, is the Eurocentricity of genomic data. Right? And speaking of data sets. So it's about, I need to highlight this thing, we need to write about it, we need to talk, which leads me to how much we need to write, to document, to have a voice from women and a voice from the global south about what's happening. And for those, there's many outlets out there, you just need to have the courage. And again, that's thinking of yourself, not just the scientist who writes academic journals and manuscripts, but somebody who has a worldview or can share about her career or talk about the challenges she faces and how that can influence policy. Because most of the time, policymakers don't know what's going on. And it's up to us to inform them and not just complain, but offer a solution. That's what I always say. You want to complain, fine, but come with a solution to advise a policymaker. And in the end, if you become a policymaker, it's better for a scientist to become a policymaker, right, than the other way around, right? Policymakers are not going to become scientists. And just to speak, I also wrote my story about all those stories of how I was involved in policymaking, which I urge you, we'll talk about it later at lunch, and I can share this book with you, but it's about writing, right? And not just writing for adults. You mentioned starting early. Somebody mentioned starting early. So even writing for children, right? So this is a whole book about evolution and a whole generation of women who are scientists, grandmother, mother, and daughter. So again, this is, in a way, a children's book is policy, because you're changing teachers, you're changing curricula, and so on. So life has taken me in places I never anticipated, but by the way, it makes it exciting. You never get bored. And when your experiment is not working, I have somewhere else to turn to get excited again and come back.
Okay, thank you so much, Rana. We can see how the different institutions could be involved, how women perspective also can change the way of seeing things, bringing more concrete solution, and then you share with us some concrete example of your life, and then I really appreciate it. So let us hear from Geraldine.
Hello, very nice to be here. Yes, thank you so much for hearing your input, which is really nice to hear, and also I fully agree that we have several positions which belong to science diplomacy, so this is not just one job where you say, okay, let's become a science diplomat, but in a way, there are several ways to get in there. One very important thing I want to say is that it shouldn't be about being male or female. It should be to be about diversity, and diversity is that it's wanted and acceptable if you are different. In a way, we are all different, but this is really something I felt when I go to several stages of leadership, that the higher you can, the more fixed are the role pictures. So I also know some female leaderships which exactly adapt the roles made more for male leaderships, and I don't think that this solves the problem or this brings different perspectives in. So. For me at the moment, also talking a little bit about myself, I was asked so often, so Geraldine, what is your role? And what's your new role? And I really don't like this question anymore, because I feel, well, I'm a person, I live it like I live it, and this is okay. And of course, I am fascinated about my job or about sharing and being a diplomat, being in politics, being in science and research. But all the time people try to tell you have to do that and that, you have to leave that. No, and this is not how diversity grows. Of course, it's always okay. You also have to accept critics. This is clear. And no one of us, and it doesn't matter if we are in leadership or not, is always right. Of course, we should always be open to accept critics and also reflect ourselves. But on the other hand, if we always only adapt, then we really land in positions where we say, okay, this is we cannot change anything anymore, because we are just searching for something, and then we make very small steps and do not ask for the big picture. And I must say that there have been several situations where I was really like pressed to say, you have to say the opinion everybody says. And then, why should I have the opinion everybody says? I can have my own opinion. I mean, you can say I don't share your opinion. This is completely okay. But don't let us be pushed to have a mass opinion or a mass picture, and no matter if we are female or male. And as you said, I mean, the simple question about having children. How often was I asked, is it possible to be a president and to have a child? And I say, okay, I think it's possible. It should be possible. And are there many men who ask the same questions I would ask? So this is... We really have to overcome that, and therefore I think we must really be proud about our diversity and of being different. And let's also add a little story, because I have somehow a famous ambassador. This is Jill Gallot. I don't know if you know her, but last year we had some time together during the Queen's lecture of the TU Berlin, and we sit the whole evening at the same table, and we are just talking about our moments where we behaved completely differently as everyone expected. And starting from this point, we are sharing some days, okay, today again something happened where everybody expected me to do that, but I did that. And I think this is really famous that we have some people here also in Berlin or that dare to do this. And I think we can all support this by just, if we feel that we see a person who behaves differently, no matter if she's in diplomacy, science, or if she's leadership or not, that we just say, yes, we support this. This is really important that we live this diversity. And just a final comment, of course, it also holds for male and for sexual diversity and ethnical diversity, international diversity, all kinds of diversity. We would also be very limited if we only focus on male and female and all come from the same country and have the same religion and all have the same family status. So diversity is much more, and we should really encourage this being different.
Thank you, Geraldine. You talk about proud of our diversity, and then I just remember also something that you say, Effrosyni. You talk about the lack of training. Sometimes you have scientists in one side, diplomat other side, and very few experts in science and diplomacy. So it should be kind of challenge in that domain. I will see the opportunity maybe to ask all of you, what are the challenges women face in the domain of science and diplomacy, and any type of opportunity we can have as women?
Maybe just allow me to comment on what Geraldine said, which I absolutely agree with. And I would add to that it's diversity, but also permeability. We don't really have that in many countries. I cannot speak for all, but I can speak for Germany. And this is something that we've been calling for. We need a more permeable system where policymakers, people with different backgrounds, different stories, different expertise, get to share responsibility for science diplomacy activities, and this helps the outcomes of science diplomacy activities or diplomacy activities in general to be more diverse and more original, perhaps more disruptive, because sometimes they need to be disruptive. And so the more personalities and backgrounds we have engaging in these efforts, the better. And you asked about the challenges. Well, this lack of permeability often makes it hard for women and for other groups to be acknowledged as science diplomats in the first place, to get the opportunity to attend meetings, conferences, to travel abroad, so that they do not officially come into this role. I was quite surprised. I'm a political scientist by training. That was my first degree, and we had a lot of international professors, but never did one person mention science diplomacy as an important field of foreign policy and of policy efforts. So it starts very early in our training and education, and we've been trying to include this in the education of PhD students, just as our administrative staff. Another aspect is a cultural one. I mean, we are, trained to think that certain cultural environments or geographical places of this earth do not necessarily accept women on an eye level as equal interlocutors, and by backing them as an institution and giving them the mandate to do so, putting them on that stage we give them a chance to prove themselves and become role models for others. One effort that we have been making also for Germany, just to be more concrete, is we have been trying to enhance the role of science attaches at the German embassies abroad. For those who do not know how this so the background of our science attachés at German embassies, some come from the Foreign Office, others come from the Research Ministry. So it's more or less 50-50. But we on the part of the science organizations, realize that this is the only group that does not have a dedicated preparation program before going abroad. So those coming from the research ministry may know the science system, but are not aware of political challenges ahead, and the other way around for the other group. And we have noticed that the majority of these people who volunteer for those positions are male. And this has to do with their background, but with the lack of knowledge of what awaits them. And by preparing them, by putting them forward to apply for these positions, we have a stronger representation also in this field in different countries where it is needed, and where we need advocates also for our scientific community.
Thank you so much, Kathryn.
So in terms of opportunities, I think in the British government, we're now hyper-conscious that we want to have diversity in, and various measures of diversity in our diplomatic corps as well as in our Home Civil Service. And we have some really important role models. So our Secretary of State, as in our most senior minister for Science, Technology and Innovation, is a woman. She just took maternity leave from her role, which is quite interesting, and took 3 months of mat leave and was covered by another minister. I bet there are loads of places where that hasn't yet happened, but it will. And our chief scientific advisor to government, she's also a woman for the first time. And anecdotally, that people are looking for women. For example, we have 9 trade commissioners across the world, and only one of them is a woman at the moment. And I was gossiping with colleagues about who might get that job next and whether they might consider applying. And he said, well, I'm not going to apply because I'm a man. And I know that they are looking for a woman. And so there are these concrete indicators that there are more opportunities for women. But I think there are still very significant cultural challenges, which are to do with the stereotyping of women and the kind of activity and behavior that is expected of women once they're in those roles. And that is going to take time to break down. So, for example, in diplomacy, also in other forms of public service, often, and this is my personal experience, this is what colleagues say to me, the woman might be asked to take on certain kinds of roles or expected to take on certain kinds of roles in a team, like looking after, doing the HR type function, looking after the team, being a good manager, being good at project management and project delivery, the person who knows where everything's supposed to be and keeps things moving forward. But when it comes to big risk-taking, innovative ideas, strategic thinking, if you're the woman at the table trying to put your hand up and say, well, actually, I think our strategy's wrong. I think we should be trying to achieve something else, and this is how we should. It can be really hard to get a hearing. And once you've had that experience a couple of times, you start to adapt yourself more to the behaviors that are expected of you, because that is how you will do well and how you will get ahead. And when people are saying, oh, where is the senior woman? Then they'll be more likely to pick you. And that is a big challenge. And we need people to call that out more in these organizations.
Okay, thank you. You talk about the cultural challenges, and it speaks to me because I come from Africa, where the society is more patriarchal, and then sometimes it's not very well perceived in certain areas when women want to have a leadership position. So I think it's not just in the field of science, diplomacy, in the field of science in general, and sometimes even it's more broad than we can imagine. Thank you, Kathryn. So not Rana, but Geraldine. How about you, the different challenges you face or you experience in the field of science diplomacy, and any opportunity you can offer?
Well, I completely agree, basically, to both of you that in Germany in particular, but I'm sure this is not only in Germany, that we have the problem that people don't come in from us. So we have a very selected population, and you have to be very self-confident in order to go away where you go to female leadership, where in every kind of field in science, I think there are some triggers which especially force this, because you are always on competition in science already, and then in politics I think it's even worse. Or so we could also ask if this is really something like the diversity we want, that we all only have people who are in competition with each other and try to push them forward. And of course, this is also something which not only belongs to male or female, but which is just characters which are forced to be in these positions. And I think it is very important that we also listen to voices which are not so loud, and that we have an agreement on that, to do that. And I really like the story you told about your minister who get in parental leave, because I really think this is something which is not normal. We had the same now in our presidial, where one of my vice presidents got pregnant, and it was a discussion where I really say, I don't want to have this discussion. This is really, we really have to protect ourselves, but in order also to protect these discussions about going into parental leave, or also about having another view, or maybe also just a character to act a little bit differently, I think, and this is also a power we could have in diversity, but maybe also this is a power we have in a little more for females, that we could say we do it together. So we have the power to say, okay, if I observe something, I stand for you, and I say, no, I would suppose that she can speak now. Or that we say, no, I cannot allow that you tell me something about a parental leave, because this is completely normal. So I think we have the force that we can we are more in this building bridges and more in building teams. Of course, teams and building bridges is not something solely to women, but this is something where you can really have an impact, because all these people who only fight for themselves, but basically they are alone, and nothing can be solved alone. So I think if we really want to have an impact, we would. It would be good if we care about our team spirit.
Thank you, Kathryn. Geraldine, I'm sorry. Rana, expert of storytelling, please can you tell us more about your personal story, any challenges you face?
So I want to share two. Although they tell you the magic thing is always three, so but let's do two. So first of all, I want to build on what was mentioned earlier about working together in teams, which means collaboration, which means communication, which means being comfortable with ambiguity, right? That's a character that's both male and female. It's a human character. But I think what we've learned, so sometimes when you want to, if you don't have something, as I said, you need to step up and do it. And it's not just about you alone, but creating a network of people. And that's what we did. We created a mentoring network that was funded by the National Science Foundation, so that women could advise each other in mid-career and senior career, because there's a lot for your early career and very few for mid and senior. And this was mentioned earlier this morning. So there's that program, and we did research on it to prove it, because it's not just creating a program, but measuring impact, as somebody mentioned earlier. Another network that I had is it's a diaspora, science diaspora network, right? And there are many of those. And a recent research came out, very first preliminary, studying networks of scientists and what makes them successful and what doesn't make them successful. How can they be member-driven? And so we actually held the first science conference for diaspora last year at the site of the General Assembly in New York City. And we wrote about it in Nature actually last week, because we produced a report finally after a year. Now, my point here is what did we learn from these networks? Is that you need to start bottom up. Many times when you do networks, you want bureaucracy first, and you need to sign MOUs, and that doesn't make anything happen. It's first do the thing on the ground, make it real on the ground, and then that will manifest itself later on in bureaucracy or formality. But start from the bottom up. Make those connections. Today, when you're here, in the next 2 days, make sure you've connected with people and send them an email immediately. Take a picture, you remember who they look like. You don't have just a list of names and oh my God, who's she? Right, that happens. These are little tips, but that's how you build your network. And you become the person people will reach out to you, and that's how you create that camaraderie. That's how you change the culture. And youth, many of you youth. And then youth is a widely, loosely defined term, okay? The other day we were with Jane Fonda. She said she's still in her third act. You know Jane Fonda, she's like, I think, 80 now. So we're all really early in our act. So again, youth are always enthusiastic. They're ready to disrupt, and I love that word. How do we disrupt? Which brings me to my second point. I don't know if anybody knows, I was distracted with my phone a little bit earlier, but I just want to share that, you know, the most important thing I see any one of us can do as a human, as a scientist, and then as a human being, is we serve humanity. And if I want to work as a scientist in science diplomacy, I think the first and most important thing for me is to help my fellow scientists, regardless if they're male or female, regardless where they come from the world. But if they are in need, I should stand up for them. That's the basic I should do. In 2021, I'm originally from Jerusalem, from Palestine. My father was a refugee. He was evicted violently by Zionists in 1948. In 2021, the house of one of my cousins, she was evicted from it in East Jerusalem. And I got so upset because this was oppression and apartheid. So I wanted to talk to the scientists in Palestine and ask them about how they are being able to do research or not in their universities. And we actually wrote a letter for Nature, which was published then in 2021. With the outbreak of war that happened this month, I wanted to reach out to those same 5 scientists and check on them. Because I'm sure you have heard the genocide that is happening. And with no internet and no connection, I couldn't get to 4. I only got to 1 of them. And she sent me this letter, which I'm going to read to you. And in this capacity, this is not Rana speaking. This is Amani. This is a professor. She lectures at the university, Islamic University of Gaza, and doing her a second PhD at the same time. So she tells me, I work on my research, finding solutions for local problems. I incorporate innovation to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals in my PhD. If I was anywhere in the world, I would have maybe become a CEO, a Nobel Prize winner, or a president. Living in a concentration camp in Gaza, where there is a huge shortage of water, food, electricity, it's not because of mismanagement or climate change, as many think. Because 32 kilometers away from my home is an Israeli settlement with people from the US, UK, Poland, where they have water, food, and electricity. The reason is the Israeli occupation of Gaza. My family lived in a village of Dras, 32 kilometers away for hundreds of years, but were expelled by force in 1948 to Gaza. Gaza, where every couple of years Israel bombs and controls basic human needs to subdue us. We even made peaceful marches for no violent resistance, but they killed my neighbor who was a nurse and my other neighbor who was a journalist reporting on what's happening, and intentionally maiming the children by breaking their bones and shooting their knees, all reported by Amnesty International. So Amani, who's a lecturer at this at the Islamic University of Gaza, also recently told me that all buildings have been razed to the ground of her university and 3 other universities as well. Nature is planning to write a report on this next week. And her last story, before I disconnected from her, because every 2 days there's a blackout, is that her sister had done a birthday for her 3 children, even in this dire thing, because we're moms, right? We're parents. And next day, all 3 girls were killed. So as a scientist, my goal is to serve humanity. And I feel helpless, by the way, when she tells me this in bits and pieces when she has internet. What can I do to help Amani to prevent a genocide? Not to mention the 50,000 women who are pregnant now in Gaza, the 5,000 who are going to deliver a baby without anesthesia. All the NICUs are cut off from the hospitals, as well as the hospitals being bombed. And Queen Rania of Jordan mentioned that there's this new term, which is Wounded Child, No Surviving Family, WCSF, that has been coined. So I'm going to end by saying we must speak even when there's a tiny evidence of something goes wrong, so we don't escalate to where we are today. And as Albert Einstein once said, the world is a dangerous place, not because of those who are doing harm, but because of those who look on and do nothing. So my last thing for you is that we owe it to them. We owe it to our fellow scientists everywhere around the world, to our fellow human beings, to look deep within our own selves and educate ourselves. Find information. We're scientists. We know where the data is. Go read about it and dispel misinformation, which was mentioned earlier. And to stand on the right side of history, whatever disruptive. Sometimes we have to disrupt. Sometimes we're not going to adapt. We have to say the truth, and it may be hard. And if we're going to engage in science diplomacy, it's difficult to navigate, I know, and especially in countries like Germany. But what helps us is if we look and remember these images, the real stories of real people that we should serve, because that's our utmost goal as humans and as scientists. Then I think suddenly things become very simple, right? When you see it's just a child, I want to help a child survive. Then the equation is very simple. It's just about saving humanity for all equality and valuing life. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Rana. Can you hear me? Oh, yes. I think this is really challenging what is going on today in the world with different conflicts. And I think this topic is really nice to address, because with science diplomacy, we can, even with conflicts, use science to create a link between countries. And we hope that each one of us here from the discussion will do his own part to address at his own level. So we will just still continue the debate, and I wish you to share with us any concrete initiative you have been part to promote female leadership in science diplomacy, and what is your biggest learning?
Mm-hmm. Please allow me to just comment on what you have been saying. I fully share the argument that it's absolutely difficult to navigate international conflict and how we as researchers or research managers react, but also proactively engage in it. We are always told, and this is what we foster, that we are the first ones to go in and the last ones to go out. And this is something that we are trying to implement, not only in regions when there is conflict and war, where reconstruction is necessary, but also in others that are presumably peaceful, but certain values are not upheld as we would like them to. And I don't have the answer, but this is something that we will be discussing for the years to come, and where I feel, to come back to your question, that especially women have a very important role to play because of their multiple roles beyond their professional activities every day, and their personal experience in many fields. Concretely, what we do to support that, I mentioned earlier that that we encourage young researchers to engage in these activities. But what we are doing right now within our organization, a very concrete example is in the context of our Management Academy to design science diplomacy and cultural diplomacy courses that bring representatives from our organization, but also others who want to join more closely with people who have been engaging in these activities for years and can act as mentors or as input givers. So. And to encourage an open discussion under Chatham House rules about where the opportunities, but also where the limitations of our efforts are, and how do we go beyond these perceived limitations, so also to challenge those. I personally feel that it is important to engage the young generation as well. I'm a mother too. I have a daughter, she's 10. And you will be surprised how interested and how, thirsty for knowledge and engagement this generation is, because obviously, I mean, they're confronted with these developments, with these questions every day through the media, and it's also our responsibility to help them navigate the information that is out there, and help them make their own minds about how they feel about it and how they would react to that, or how they would challenge certain situations. Not only when they grow up and assume certain roles, but also where they are right now. So yes, from the professional point of view, training those that are already in these roles and are sometimes having a hard time coping with the complexity of the situations that arise almost every day, but also at the same time, through the experience that we have gained through our work, trying to sensitize and engage the young generation, irrespective of where they come from and if they're male, female, or whatever.
Okay, thank you. Before giving the floor to Geraldine, I wish to ask how much time is left for the panel. Oh, question. Okay, so we will open then the floor to the public for the questions. Yes. Oh, okay.
Thank you very much for this great discussion. I'm a philosopher and economist, and I work on climate change and the transition to a just and sustainable future. And I'm convinced that scientists have a responsibility to foster and support this transformation. And for me, this includes exactly what we've been talking about, or you have been talking about, being female leaders in academia, to communicate research results, and also to be active as science in the fields of science diplomacy. But on the other hand, in my daily business as a postdoc researcher, I experience that this is a disadvantage. And this is because it takes time to do science communications, to attend events like this. And this is time that I don't have to publish paper and to get third-party funding, which is in the end what I need to get a professorship or tenure track. So my question would be, and this is the challenge that I face. We have a president from university here. We have somebody from the Helmholtz organization here. So what is needed that these activities are not a disadvantage for us young researchers, but become an advantage? I'm interested to hear your opinion.
Geraldine?
Yeah, thank you very much for this question. So first of all, I really appreciate your engagement on climate change, and I completely agree to you that what we all should work for is humanity and our common world. And this is what you said, and this is what you said. And this should be our indicators. No publication, no third-party funding. Our indicators should be humanity and our world. I completely know that you're completely right with what you say, and probably there's no easy way out of this, so there will not be a solution for you, your personal academic careers. But I think that the topic is on the political ground right now. We have the debates about Ich bin Hanna, we have the debates about the Wissenschaftliches Zeitvertragsgesetz, sorry for switching to Germany. It sounds a little bit technical, but and we have debates also about discrimination in the scientific area. So I think it's a good it's a good time to work together and to go as a team and to say, okay, no, we don't accept it anymore. And I think it's exactly right that you are here, so thank you very much for that, for taking the time and also for asking these questions. And I could only support you, like asking these questions again and again and again, also to your your professors in your institutions. And I think there is a team and there is a community who shares this. And the more we become, the more difficult it would be to ignore us. And I really would like to invite you to go on in this way. And the same is it's the same as for you. I was really like being in tears, like hearing your letter. I just wanted to add to your comment that we really see also today we are all in Berlin, and in Berlin we really are more or less the lucky ones at the moment in Germany. But still, we can only see that times are changing. I mean, we have the AfD with more than 20% right now, only 2 years left until the new elections. When should we do something against to fight for our democracy, to fight for human rights? We're not now. So we are not in a position anymore. Times are changing. We are not in a position anymore to just focus on our own budget or our own, I don't know, career. We really have to focus on the big challenges, and the climate change, and of course wars and conflicts, and also like a democracy, which is not compared to the world. I think we have 6% of countries where we have democracy, but in Germany we also have discussions about that, and not only in the parties where we'd say that they are radical, but also in parties where we'd say they belong to the democracy part. You really have strange positions sometimes. So I really, really feel, and I hope that you all stand on your way, because this is a correct thing to do, and we should really go into joint forces, defending democracy, going for against climate change, and going for humanity. This should be our common goal, and this should be the only goals, and not something like, I don't know, my next paper. I know that doesn't help you, but I can just say, whenever you have the next discussion, give me a call. I try to support you.
Okay, thank you, Geraldine.
Maybe
any other questions?
Maybe I can add to that, if I may. Fully agree with Geraldine, and I think that we need to reach a point where these criteria are more important, these indicators. But it starts with awareness. It doesn't mean that you have to become an activist and dedicate a large amount of your time to these efforts, but it starts with you sitting here asking yourself this and engaging through your work and the conferences that you attend for your work with other people that are faced with the same challenges, and also being aware of the risks, but also of the opportunities of engaging with other partners internationally, and using science diplomacy to promote values that we share, and actively contribute to the well-being of other colleagues outside. And at some point, you may find the opportunity to actively participate in networks, or even found your own at a later stage. But I think it really begins with being aware that these challenges exist, and that we have a responsibility, as you rightly said, to raise our voice and make a contribution. And another aspect that we didn't touch upon today, but which is also a very let's say urgent discussion that we are engaging is knowledge security. So how do we protect the knowledge that we are creating from unwanted use? And this is the dark side of our science diplomacy efforts, actually. The one is to open up, to engage, to promote diversity and the role of women and other groups of people that are underrepresented. The other one is to protect these values and to protect the knowledge that we have. And so this is something that every single scientist and research manager should be aware of.
Yeah. Justine, can I just also jump in? And that was something very concrete. So one of the things that we're doing in the UK, the UK Research and Innovation, which is our kind of main government body sponsoring research, is that we're experimenting with allowing people to apply for funding where they have a narrative form CV. So instead of this list of jobs and papers, which is born out of a culture which is quite competitive and who can get the most publications and etc., we're saying, okay, well, women and people from other backgrounds maybe have a different way to present their experience and present what they've learned. So let's let them demonstrate what they've done in a different form, write it out, and let's consider that on an equal basis for funding. It's just a pilot project at the moment, but I think that those sorts of things, if we could also, get them rolled out in the UK, rolled out here in Germany, would be great.
Okay, thank you. Let's take the next question, please. It will be addressed to Rana first, unless you specify it.
My name is Nadine Knab. I'm a postdoctoral scholar at Tel Aviv University in Israel, and I study and research on social psychology and peace psychology. And I'm very grateful for this panel because I think my topic is especially relevant for science diplomacy. And I wonder, we always talk about changing structures, and we talk about these macro level challenges and changes we need to undertake without forgetting that the change actually also has to start within, and to also reconsider if we carry our own biases of judging situations that might impact the responsibility we carry in order to interpret, for example, also scientific results. And thereby, it's more like a comment that I hope that you're aware of this responsibility that you all take to also reconsider the biases that we all have in interpreting situations that happen currently in our life and in our world, and the responsibility we have, and especially you have, to be on such a public space and communicating that. So I think we need to raise our voice, not only to changing structures in our world, but also changing structures within ourselves that might contribute to these conflicts that we see currently in our world.
Thank you so much. So
can I comment on that just to aid what she's saying?
Yes, you take the floor. I will because there is too many hands. I prefer to take maybe a set of 4 questions.
Fine.
After we will go to make sure you address the maximum of questions. The second one, you will take the floor first.
No problem.
Okay.
It's okay.
Okay. Actually, I was about to say pretty much the same thing, but with different words. So you just encouraged us to speak up in the spirit of benefiting humanity and to address issues. And my issue that I would like to address is using terms like apartheid or genocide, when we do know that the factual basis is actually quite different. And I do not see a way how using these terms can relate to benefiting humanity. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question. Yes, please. The mic is coming.
Yes. My question is to the university president, Mrs. Rauch. We talk a lot about internationalization of universities in Germany. And universities always say that they are looking forward to welcome more international students or more migrant students to come and study. But we have an identity problem. I spent much of my adulthood that I lived so far here in Germany. But I always talk to my PhD supervisor when he was still my supervisor, and he always rejects my opinion. And he doesn't believe me, and nobody believes us, that we lack the validation of our identity. So everybody is talking about integration, and they think that we who arrive as adult students are supposed to forget where we come from or who we are, what our values are, and adopt a new set of character or whatever. And there is not much done in terms of helping students find themselves at the university space. Not many students are aware of the Studentenwerk and the elections and everything, so they don't even have a say in it. And I would like to know how you, as a woman leader, could make a change to this, this reality.
So thank you very much for the question.
Could you wait a little bit? The last question, then Rana, then you take
it. Was a question to me.
You have to keep tab.
Okay, so let's go to Rana.
Okay. Oh, yeah, I don't need the mic, sorry. First of all, thank you very much for being honest and open. Because if we don't have these conversations, we will never move forward because everybody will be their own bubble. And I think this is great. So first, to take the first comment about trauma and psychology, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I live in Jordan, and Jordan has been a haven for every refugee you can think in the world. We have the Palestinian refugees, we have the Syrian, we have the Iraqi, we have the Yemeni, we have the Somali, we have the from Sudan, we even have people from Ukraine. You name it, we have it. And because of that, there's been a lot of research money poured into Western institutions to do research on this population in Jordan. And unfortunately, as you mentioned, many scientists come from Western universities with their own mindsets and their unconscious bias. I'm assuming the full benefit of the doubt. They're good people. They want to do research. But they don't engage with local scientists to really understand the dynamics on the ground, the cultural perceptions of the different terms that we use to describe behavior, from as simple as what is trauma, what does that mean, what does empowerment mean, what does flourishing and resilience mean, and what happens if they don't engage with a local scientist who can help them interpret the data, and even going before that, designing the research, what survey question you're using, that unconsciously, what happens is the Western scientists will gather the data based on, in the best case, a culturally appropriated survey, but not necessarily so, and then they interpret the data according to what they think it is, and then a policy report comes out. And because it's done by the expert who's coming from Harvard, Yale, Cambridge, whatever, everybody follows it. And it is the farthest from the truth. It's like two radio waves that never interact. So I couldn't agree more. And these are things we have been working on, actually funded by UKRI. We have a network called Rights for Time. And this network is scholars and practitioners in 5 countries, Jordan, Lebanon, Palestine, and Kenya. And they're working with providing those collaborations between local academics and international academics, local practitioners and international practitioners, so we can create a new dialogue, a new lexicon to address these issues and have role models and exemplars. So thank you very much for bringing that up. The second person who commented about the terms that were used by the scientists coming from Gaza. We are scientists, and we know the rules of how we interpret science, how we report on science. We have to have well-known resources that are documented. All those terms that were mentioned, that I read, that I mentioned as well, these are words coming out of the UN General Council. These are from Amnesty International. These are from Human Rights Watch. And these are from Jewish Voice for Peace. I was quoting exactly the terms that they are using to describe the situation in Gaza. This is not me. I'm a scientist, and I only use the terms that have been agreed upon based on the facts on the ground. So, but thank you for making sure that we verify that, because that is what a good scientist who wants to make sure the facts are right on the ground. And that's our job, to remove misinformation and to make sure that all the truth is out there so people can make their own judgments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Geraldine?
Okay, we are a little bit jumping in the topics. First of all, I really feel, as I said before, it's important that you feel in loyalty, of course, to your country, and that you be yourself as you are. And integrating does not mean that you have to skip your past or that you lose your identity. Definitely not. I can really imagine that you're fully true what you said. It's for certain difficult, and it's also not so easy to change it, because it's there are many things you could change and many things were behind, but it's also not so easy to say whether how you could change the mindset. What we do at TU Berlin, for example, or what I do, is that I have monthly a so-called campus Sprechstunde, where we meet in student cafes, where everybody can join, and this is really open, so everybody can just come and relaxedly talk about his topics. And if we see, or if I see that several topics are pronounced again and again and again, we are also likely to adapt it in the presidium. We just had, for example, because you talked about the elections, we had for the elections at our university, we just had a special event for students also, or not only for it's not only open for students, but it's in a cafe of students, so everyone can come there, also professors. But I just to say that this is very low level coming in, so it's there are also people not coming to see me, but it's just like being there and having the opportunity to talk. So I think this is a very open-minded setting, where we also talked about the election, how that works, and how you can engage, and what your voice, if you are going to the election, is what the topics are, which are there for the next weeks. And of course, there are other challenges, like we are still have not a good culture, where we have still not good translation to English, for example, for documents or administrative stuff, or also like master's programs are not always in English. So this is really something where we must change the system. But this is more like the position of integration. It really felt like cultural identity, and I can just say it's important that you keep it. I would be very interested in coming into a conversation what your opinion is, what the university could do, because for sure I have not the one and only answer to this. I could just say that we are of course very open also to discuss formats which would help people that are at your university.
Any question? Okay. Thank you so much. So today I'm still inspired by our panelists, their perception, their perspective, their experience in the field of science diplomacy, and we see that it's really important that to address the different issues and to inspire those who want to follow this field of science diplomacy. So we talk about the cultural barrier, the stereotype, the lack of training, and then we see how someone talk about the bottom-up approach to make the field more permeable, to make it more diverse, because including women is not just to address the gender equity aspect, it's also to bring some innovative solution. So I'm really happy for today's panel. So let us just take a commitment to change to support the young female leader, change to recognize those who have done some work in the field of science leadership. So there is a quote in Africa that I will just actualize with the topic. We will say that if we want science diplomatic field to go fast, let men do it alone. But if you want it to go far, let include diversity, and especially with the perspective of women. Thank you so much.
Nice.